The golden lights of the ballroom glittered against the marble floors of Aunt Darlene's Houston estate, refracting off the chandeliers like 1,000 tiny judgments. I'm Juliana Wynn, 34 years old, and tonight I was just another silent silhouette in a sea of power suits and designer gowns at the Chandler family's annual winter gala. The room pulsed with artificial charm, laughter too polished, compliments too rehearsed. I stood near the punch fountain, my forest green satin dress understated but elegant, clutching a glass of sparkling cider I hadn't sipped from in 10 minutes. The air smelled of wealth, citrus perfume, expensive leather, and fresh roses trucked in just for the evening. Juliana? Aunt Darlene's voice sliced through the hum like a flute played too sharply. Still working as a secretary at that tech place? What's it called again? Pressline Dynamics, I replied evenly. Still there, executive assistant to the CEO. Her pearl earrings swayed as she laughed lightly. Darling, you're far too smart to fetch coffee for someone else. You should be running something by now. I nodded, smiling just enough to be polite. I didn't tell her I was running something. That Crestline's board had quietly appointed me interim CEO 2 months ago after a sudden resignation. That just yesterday, I'd finalized a $200 million 0-cent acquisition that would change our market position for good. But I wasn't here to impress. I was here to watch. Jules, my cousin Reed grinned as he swaggered over, one hand in his tuxedo pocket, the other twirling a bourbon. He'd recently become vice president of outreach at Chandler Holdings, a glorified title for someone who golfed more than he worked. I heard Crestline's hiring, he said, nudging me with his elbow. I can pull some strings for you. We need admins and legal. I took another slow sip. Thanks, Reed. But I'm happy where I am. He smirked. Happy is for people who've stopped trying. Maybe he was right. I had stopped trying. To prove myself to them. Their version of success had never included someone like me. I stared across the ballroom at the family legacy etched into oil paintings. Chandlers in suits, Chandlers at ribbon cuttings, Chandlers on magazine covers. I knew mine was coming soon, just not the way they expected. 12 years ago, when I was just 22, I'd sat in this very house, in Uncle David's walnut-paneled study, with a flash drive full of business models and a fire in my chest. Fresh from Stanford, I'd pitched a consultancy that would help minority-owned startups scale using AI-backed market analysis. Uncle David leaned back in his chair, unimpressed. Consulting? Sounds risky. Aunt Darlene laughed. Honey, you'd make a wonderful executive assistant. You've got the organized type. I had smiled through their laughter, nodded when they said maybe next year. I went home that night, slipped out of my heels, and stood barefoot on my tiny apartment balcony in East Austin, whispering a promise into the dry Texas air. I'll build something so big they'll pretend they always believed in me. And now here I was, Crestline's new CEO, quietly confirmed, publicly unannounced. The ink on our $200 million 0-cent deal with a global logistics firm still drying. The PR team already drafting my Forbes profile. Reed and Aunt Darlene could keep their smirks, because soon they'd be hosting another gala, and this time my face would be on the invitation. I didn't build it for applause. I built it because I had to prove, if only to myself, that I was more than their dismissals. I called it Altura Strategies, a name that meant height in Spanish, a nod to the places I planned to reach. It started above an auto body shop in East Austin, the kind of place that smelled like grease and ambition. The walls were thin, the AC rattled, and the internet barely held during video calls. But I had a dream, a laptop, and the grit no one in my family had ever seen in me. They thought they'd buried me in doubt, but really, they'd handed me the shovel to dig my own path. Altura wasn't just a company. It was a quiet rebellion. My first client was a struggling coffee roaster on the verge of bankruptcy. I spent every waking hour poring over their invoices, renegotiating bean contracts, rebuilding their wholesale model from scratch. When their revenue rose 22% in one quarter, word spread fast through Austin's startup scene. By 25, I felt the spark of something real. Something mine. but I knew better than to put my name on the door. So, I stayed in the shadows, letting partners front the deals while I orchestrated everything behind the scenes. Legal structuring, growth plans, investor decks. My name wasn't in the headlines, that was by design. Altura expanded fast. Denver, Nashville, Phoenix. Each new branch was a quiet victory. Every contract signed was a reminder that I was no longer the girl laughed out of Uncle David's study. But to the Chandlers, I was still just Juliana. The assistant, the disappointment, the invisible one. That didn't bother me, not when I was helping real people, like the team at Riverbend AgTech, a family-run equipment company in Missouri, on the verge of being bought out and gutted. When I saw that Chandler Holdings, led by Uncle David, was targeting them, everything changed. It wasn't just about growth anymore, it was about integrity. While Chandler Holdings used predatory buyouts to strip companies for parts, Altura took a different path. We helped these businesses breathe again. I built a private research unit within Altura. Confidential, fast-moving, they tracked acquisitions, mapped Chandler's patterns. A shipyard in Galveston, a spice brand in Tucson, a solar firm in Nevada. We reached out before Chandler could close. Let us review your books first. Our message read, there might be a better way. Many said yes. Those who did, we worked miracles, custom 90-day plans, cash flow triage, strategic pivots. Most never sold, they survived and thrived. Every time we saved a company from Chandler Holdings, it felt like balancing the scale. But I never said a word, not to the clients, not even to my team. To them I was Jules, the operations lead who never missed a deadline. But in the quiet moments, after long nights of strategy sessions or field visits, I'd walk through our Austin headquarters, glass walls, humming with the energy of impact, and see my reflection in the windows. Not a secretary, not as shallow. A woman who had quietly shifted the tide. When Riverbend AgTech came under direct threat, I knew it was time to step forward. Their land, legacy, and 50 employees were about to be swallowed by a Chandler shell company. I couldn't watch it happen. Our team built a counteroffer. Swift, airtight. We'd invest in Riverbend, not absorb them, keep their people, scale their innovation, and we had the capital to back it. Altura had just secured a $200 million, 0 cents, partnership with a global logistics firm. The morning of the Riverbend meeting, I stood at the head of our top-floor boardroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened to the Austin skyline. Cranes, sunlight, movement. My tailored indigo suit felt like armor. 10 years of quiet wins pressed into every seam. Kaylin, my executive assistant, laid out the files with a smile. They're all downstairs, she said, press included. For the first time in a decade, I wouldn't be behind the scenes. I'd walk into that room as Juliana Wynn, founder and CEO of Altura Strategies. Not for revenge. For every voice that had been ignored, including mine. If Juliana's quiet rise and fearless defiance move you, don't miss what comes next. Subscribe now to follow her journey. From the shadows of doubt to the spotlight of power, each chapter reveals how resilience rewrites legacy, one bold move at a time. Her story isn't over, and neither is yours. Join us as the truth steps fully into the light. Merger terms, equity ratios, acquisition leverage. At precisely 8:45 a.m., the Chandler Holdings delegation arrived at the Frost Tower conference level in downtown Austin. Uncle David, Reed, Meredith Chandler. They didn't recognize the woman at the head of the table, not really. To them, I was still the forgettable niece who once fetched coffee at family parties and silently filled out spreadsheets no one asked for. I stood, buttoned my blazer, and met their eyes with composure. Good morning, I said evenly. I'm Juliana Wynn, CEO of Altura Strategies, and I'll be leading today's meeting. Meredith's fountain pen slipped from her hand and hit the table with a sharp clink. Reed's smirk froze, jaw tensing as he flipped open his notepad like it could shield him. Uncle David blinked slowly, squinting as if reading my name tag would change what he was hearing. You? He asked, CEO, I nodded, letting the silence stretch before adding, "You never saw me because you never bothered to look." I motioned to Kaylin, who distributed the proposal folders across the table, each sealed with Altura's gold crest. Inside, the full merger offer for Riverbend AgTech, backed by our 35% share acquisition, already secured through private placement. I calmly recited the list of strategic blocks we'd implemented in recent quarters. Green Ridge Textiles, Solar Vista, EchoScan Medical, all transactions you attempted, all stabilized through Altura intervention. The room stilled. My voice was steady, but each word landed with purpose. I wasn't here for personal revenge. I was here to reclaim the dignity so many families had lost at the hands of ruthless takeovers. David's face didn't move, but the veins on his temple betrayed him. Reed rifled through the document, muttering about regulatory scrutiny. Meredith whispered, "She's been in the room this whole time." I leaned forward. "You can sign the merger agreement, retain partial benefit, or wait. In 10 days, I'll complete the open market acquisition of Riverbend's remaining shares. Altura will hold control, with or without your participation." David pushed back his chair, storming out without a word. Kaylin leaned toward me. "You want to pause the meeting?" I shook my head. "No. Let them feel the shift." 15 minutes passed. The boardroom remained tense, quiet but charged like the air before a storm. Then, the door opened. As returned, jaw set, but the fire in his eyes was gone. He sat. He signed. His pen scratched across the page like a reluctant surrender. I gave a respectful nod, gathered my folder, and walked out into the hallway. The Austin skyline gleamed through the glass. Spring wind rushed through the atrium doors, sharp and electric, but I didn't feel cold. That afternoon, Altura's private valuation soared by 17%. Chandler Holdings slumped 8.4%. For the first time, my name appeared on Bloomberg's evening crawl. Juliana Wynn, the enigma behind Altura's ascent. I didn't relish their humiliation. That moment wasn't for them. It was for every person told to stay quiet, for every business owner bullied into signing away their life's work. 3 weeks later, I received formal notice. Altura's 31% stake in Chandler Holdings entitled me to nominate a candidate for their board. I didn't hesitate. The boardroom that day was colder than the AC dial. A long walnut table, 12 chairs, and 12 sets of eyes that didn't know whether to flinch or fake a welcome. I walked in wearing an ivory pantsuit, heels clicking with certainty. Their legacy was stitched into the wallpaper, but I carried something stronger. Earned power, quiet but undeniable. Reed was absent, sidelined by legal inquiries tied to a failed acquisition scheme that finally caught up with him. I stood at the front of the Chandler Holdings boardroom, surrounded by men who once dismissed me as an admin with delusions. My voice was even, my message unmistakable. "Chandler Holdings will no longer strip businesses to the bone," I said. "We will rebuild them, with integrity, with intention." At first, silence. Then slow, hesitant applause. A few claps from junior board members. Then a wave of reluctant respect followed. Awkward, yes, but real. A week later, Meredith Chandler sent an email with a single line. "You did the impossible. I'd like to learn from you." I saved it, unread but not deleted. Uncle David submitted his resignation the following month. His letter was raw, handwritten, almost vulnerable. "I misjudged you, Juliana. You've shown us a better way." I folded it neatly and placed it beside my first investor contract. Reminders of battles won not through vengeance, but vision. Aunt Lenora, caught mocking my little startup in a now viral clip, quietly disappeared from industry panels. No statement, just silence. At a Houston finance conference, I passed Uncle David in the lobby. He didn't speak, only gave me a small nod of acknowledgement. These weren't trophies, they were tremors. Signs that something in the system was shifting. A culture long ruled by extraction and ego was learning, however slowly, to listen. Back at the Altura office, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Lady Bird Lake. Lights from the bridge shimmered like stars caught in water. I hadn't built this to destroy my past. I'd built it to rewrite the future. The media finally found me. I made front pages and financial segments, but I chose my moments. The spotlight is powerful, if used wisely. At a Washington, D.C. gala in 2025, I accepted the Strategic Innovator Award beneath a sky so clear it looked unreal. As I stepped to the podium, I scanned a sea of suits, scholars, and changemakers. I cleared my throat and smiled. 10 years ago, I began. My family laughed when I said I wanted to build a consulting firm. They told me to marry smart, not build bold. The crowd laughed with me, the good kind, warm, knowing. I listened, I added, just not the way they meant. More laughter, then stillness. Success isn't this award, or evaluation. It's a message from a student that says, I didn't think I could, until I saw you. The applause thundered, long and alive. Invitations flooded in after that night. Business schools, innovation summits, women's leadership forums. I accepted carefully, not to bask in spotlight, but to share the truth behind the shine. I told them about the late nights buried in spreadsheets, the mornings filled with doubt, the choices to stay in the shadows until I was ready to lead in the light. In every audience, I found someone, a young woman, a quiet voice, who reminded me of who I was. That's why I launched the Altitude Fund, a venture capital initiative for women-led startups. Former assistants, single mothers, night shift nurses, turned tech founders, not just dreamers, doers. My heart swelled not for the size of Altura, but for the scope of the dreams we were igniting. Then one morning, a plain white envelope arrived on my desk, hand-delivered and marked, for Juliana Wynn's eyes only. Inside was a letter. From Uncle David. I thought business was power and control. You showed me something else. Humanity. I'm stepping down permanently. I'm sorry. I sat in my chair, coffee warm in my hands, not feeling triumphant, but reflective. Real change had come, not just in me, but in the very system that once confined me. I tucked the letter into Altura's strategic journal, where we log our biggest shifts. Because sometimes, justice arrives not with noise, but with a signature and a quiet apology. The first Altitude Fund roundtable felt like a sunrise. Around me sat women no one had ever bet on before. Nurses, teachers, immigrant founders, their voices clear, confident, bold. And I knew we weren't just rebuilding businesses, we were rebuilding belief. I saw my journey reflected in theirs, the sting of being overlooked, the quiet strength to rise anyway. Altura was no longer just a firm. It had become a signal fire, calling out to anyone who'd ever been told they weren't enough. I realized then, my legacy wasn't written in headlines or stock valuations. It lived in the courage I helped awaken, the permission I gave others to dream fearlessly. 3 months after the Chandler boardroom shift, my life was unrecognizable. No more hiding behind job titles or behind-the-scenes influence. I was Juliana Wynn, a symbol for those once dismissed. The world finally saw me, but I stayed grounded, choosing purpose over prestige. At a summit in New York, I told a crowd of young women, power isn't handed to you, it's built, brick by quiet brick. Even when no one's watching. Altura thrived, but the Altitude Fund became my heartbeat, supporting women who'd been ignored, yet now launched ventures blooming like wildflowers after a storm. As once the girl mocked for dreaming too big, now I rise not to prove anyone wrong, but to show you that you can rise too. If Juliana's journey moves you, subscribe and share your voice below. Let's build boldly together.